Hey, welcome to Swedenborg Live. We're so glad to have you. Signs of a Spiritual Awakening. That's what we're looking at today. And I am so glad to get to spend some time developing my will and my intellect with all of you at home. Thanks for hanging out. Today we're going to be doing nothing but answering the questions that are on all of your hearts. So that you've got that chat machine in front of you. Get in there writing stuff because we want to know what's on your mind. And we love talking about everything. So thanks so much for doing that. I'm not going to do it alone. I've got an awesome panel here with me. As always, everyone, would you introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Chelsea Odner, and I'm a writer for Swedenborgian Life.
I'm Cara Dahm, and I am the Latin consultant for Off the Left Eye.
And I'm Karin Childs. I'm a writer at Off the Left Eye and community manager. I'm glad to be here.
It's such a cool group of people, and I mean that, like, the panelists and all of you at home. It's just going to be a wonderful time. There's a couple of great things happening today. First of all, you have a chance to have your support of Off the Left Eye go twice as far. We have a $10,000 match still in effect. We're just about halfway there. We got to keep it going. So if you donate otle.cosvox.com, double the money will go into this kind of programming and everything else that we do. And if we right now tonight get $100, just $100 from everybody combined, we will all give you a bonus 15 minutes of Q&A because we love you and we want to show our support for your support. So you'll see a little thermometer on the screen that'll go up. Hey, let's see if we can hit our goal today. And coming up, we actually have a raffle. The new donor raffle. So for the months of July and August, everybody who donated for the first time you said, look at this Off the Left Eye, Swedenborg, whatever you want to call it, this good message. I feel like this is as valuable as coffee or as valuable as cereal, and I'm going to support it. If it was you first time in July or August, you may win a piece of Off the Left Eye new logo swag that is not to be missed. So that's coming up. But first, let's check in with what you guys were thinking this week. We have our question. We have posed a question on our YouTube channel to you, the audience. This time it was, what does being spiritually awakened mean to you? Can we look at terms here because that's pretty broad? Can we get a sense of what that looks like in each individual person's perception? So Karin, our community manager, what did people have to say about that?
Here are some excerpts from your wonderful responses. As always, it's a wonderful variety. So here are some samples. I have been awakened to the depth and diversity of other people's experiences of life. Now I consider the other person's perspective. I listen more. Being a better person and taking that task seriously, caring about others. Freeing from fear and connecting with true self. Alignment and awareness of personal and universal truth and wisdom. Being positive in interaction with others. Shedding fear and doubt, anchoring heaven on earth when it is needed most.
Right.
Being consciously aware of all that is true, especially in a world where so much of the truth is hidden or twisted. Sometimes accepting the truth may take time. Seeing and understanding one, meaning oneness, that we are all human beings, not a color of skin. Being awareness and presence without thoughts dictating every single moment. Too much thinking. A new perspective, seeing the Lord's presence everywhere, including myself. Knowing that love is life, looking around and appreciating everything, the good and the bad. To feel okay right here, right now. Gaining deeper insights into myself and the world. My love of God, my fellow humans, and of fellow beings on our Mother Earth has intensified. Being a channel for the Holy Spirit to do God's will upon this earth. Yes. It's about love and connectedness. We as individuals have different purposes and things to accomplish, but we are all one. Growing awareness of the essential interconnectedness of our earthly experience to the unfolding will of divine providence. Able to be aware of two levels and desiring the inner to take hold. Effortless love and compassion for others, low anxiety and fear due to trust in the bigger picture. I am definitely not there yet, LOL. I would love to be, though, someday.
It's a good thing they're not, because then the rest of us would feel bad.
Yep. The process of distinguishing what's happening from what I'm making it mean. Yeah, some discernment on your own thinking. And finally, more aware of how important you are to the world and how important love is to our planet, people, animals, and plants. I am more aware of God's presence.
That's cool.
What a great list. And
Yeah.
and what a list, like a tangible, and also nobody is going to be upset to learn that their neighbor in their apartment building wrote that. This is the kind of people y'all want around, because these are good spiritual awakenings. So thanks so much, everybody, for sharing that. Hey, guys, before we begin, last time we talked about True Christianity 607, where Kara pointed out that there's a little quote that goes like this: "We cannot become spiritual unless we are associated with others who are spiritual." That's what it says. Guess what we're doing right now? Why are we doing this show? Because we're all trying to do this spiritual thing together, and it doesn't work unless we put our heads together like we are today. So on that note, let's get to our first question. This is Witch of the Wildwood, who asks, is everything in the Bible a correspondence, or are there parts of it that should not be read correspondentially? Can you go overboard? Can you have a correspondence overdose? Or are there parts where you're just trying to read too much into where it seems to be obviously saying something in the literal sense? So what's the answer, everybody? Karin.
One thing Swedenborg distinguishes, if you've been around our channel a while, you might have heard that there are certain books of the Bible that he picks out, that he focuses on as having a continuous inner meaning, meaning that there is a complete story from beginning to end if you take these particular books of the Bible. And it's a story of the inner process of Jesus from birth to glorification, when he was resurrected. It's also the story of our own spiritual journey or spiritual rebirth. It's also the story of the process of the human race, the spiritual development, the spiritual journey of the human race. So it's pretty much the hero's journey is continuously told through these certain books of the Bible that Swedenborg points out. He does say that the other books in the Bible do have some correspondences in them. It's just that they're not this continuous story. And I get the feeling that the epistles are letters by the apostles as they're starting. I think of them more as like sermons. So that's a little bit, by the apostles and by Paul. So they are taking what they learned from Jesus and turning it into talks that they're giving to other people. And I do, when I sometimes read in there, I can see, that's seems correspondential, but it seems like that's a little bit different thing than this divine message that was particularly guided in certain books of the Bible to be this continuous inner story. And so I think you can find correspondences in other places, but there are particular books that have this inner message that's a complete story if you learn it.
Absolutely. So two different modes of engagement for really two very different texts, maybe with the same mission, but usually stuck together into the same book. Kara or Chelsea, did you have any follow-ups or rebuttals to what Karin said?
No rebuttals here. It does occur to me, though, that, for instance, as Karin referred to, the epistles, they are letters, they're talks, they're sort of evangelistic in tone, or preaching in tone, whereas the books that Swedenborg focuses on as correspondential are stories. And when you think of in the New Testament, the story of the Lord's birth, or the stories, the bizarre stories in Revelation that involve all this imagery, that imagery is what lends itself to correspondence, rather than just ideas like the epistles are talking about.
You know what? It's like all the books of the Bible that probably a lot of churches who are Christian churches who are like evangelization focused, thinking, how do we get newcomers in? Well, don't read these books because they're weird. Those are the ones with the correspondences in them.
Yes, right.
Yeah. Chelsea, have any further thoughts?
Yeah, just like thinking about it kind of generally in terms of this idea of, is there anything that should not be read correspondentially? And I guess I just think like Swedenborg writes about it, and I think it's just sort of a part of being human, that the more we use our rational faculty to think through things carefully, like to not just, swallow it because we're told to necessarily, but, take time to really think it through for ourselves and connect to spiritual ideas, that correspondences are just really this cool thing that's just everywhere, ubiquitous in creation and like there's this idea of correspondences in the Bible that sounds kind of intellectual and abstract, but on the other hand, Swedenborg talks about how correspondences are like this living, dynamic thing that is what connects us to heaven, and that's happening, everywhere in some capacity in all of creation, even though it's sort of concentrated in this really essential way in the Bible, and like that's what Swedenborg writes, and so I kind of think everything's kind of fair game, but in the same way that you would have to be respectful of where are different texts coming from, or what is, respecting other people's freedom, respecting people's background, because people ask us, well, what does this thing in my dream correspond to? And it's like, well, it can be really fruitful to think about what are the correspondences in your dream, or you're reading a text that's from some other culture and you're like, well, there's sort of feels like there's correspondences in that. And it's like, sure, there is. And that can be useful for your own spiritual life and thinking about your own dreams and stuff. But then to sort of, create respectful boundaries about like, well, just because I see it one way doesn't necessarily mean somebody else is going to see it the same way. The Lord kind of is working in everybody to, lead us to spiritual ideas. So it's just like I feel like go ahead and use correspondences where it feels useful to you, that idea, because I just think it's going to just bring you deeper and deeper into interesting things to think about. But then, it's not necessarily like everything, oh, it's only this way and nothing else, or something.
Yeah, I love your two main points, that correspondences are not just a simple arithmetic one-to-one word means this. And then the other one, that the correspondences are everywhere. I'm thinking of the passage in the Garden of Eden story where there's an angel placed to guard the garden and the sword is spinning in the angel's hand. And Swedenborg describes a correspondential meaning of that being that there are infinite or many potential meanings to all the pieces of the word. But as long as they're all facing towards good, that's good. And then in sacred scripture, I was just reading Sacred Scripture, which is one of Swedenborg's smaller books, and he has this really great section where he succinctly lays out that universal idea, where it really gave me this cool sense of context of where the Bible fits in, because he says the hieroglyphics in Egypt were based on correspondences. The worship of all kinds of cultures who worshipped in nature was based on correspondences. They were in the ancient word and all this. And the Bible is pure correspondences. So I almost wonder if like the reason why Swedenborg spends so much time on the Bible and puts it up so high is that it's some kind of super correspondence cluster, and that there is correspondences there and they're pure, like they reach a critical mass where something divine happens. There are correspondences in everything. It's really, really good. And there's something going on in there that's really intense. Oh, sorry for bumping my thing. Yes. So Karin.
Yeah, just to add, because I was reading something recently and I can't remember exactly what it was saying, but it was the idea that the Bible in Providence was just like the ancient word had been when it was understood, because the understanding of correspondences had started to get kind of scattered and disconnected, even though it was there everywhere, like Chelsea's saying, and it still is. What was needed was to bring this back into a whole thing that was all connected, and there was something very important spiritually, technologically to keep that connection with heaven going when it was getting too scattered in the other ways.
Yep, and two random scattered thoughts to end it. And one is that Swedenborg will be going through Secrets of Heaven and explaining line by line the Bible, but sometimes he'll just say that going here meant going to a place doesn't need explanation. And sometimes the literal and correspondential sync up so tightly. And then finally, he talks about the hands in the face. He says, like, the Bible is like Jesus, I think he describes it as, reaching out to you, or a person, I can't remember, but most of them is clothed, but the hands in the face are not. So there's certain things that do unto others as you would have them do unto you, that the spiritual meaning and the literal meaning make one. Even with the 10 Commandments, there's deeper levels always, but you can read it literally and still get something good out of it. Hey, so let's move on, because now that people have seen what a 15 minutes with us is like, do you want to get another one? Well, Sean gave us a donation, our first donation of the night. Thank you, Sean. We're halfway to our $100 goal, so it's not going to take much to get there. Go to otle.cosvox.com, and you too can be part of what achieves our goal. Next question. This is Ronnie Libra, who asks, what does Swedenborg say about how in the Torah, the Old Testament, God is all about destruction, war, genocide, live sacrifice, etc., etc., but then Jesus is about love and peace and goodness? Did God calm down, just take a breath, or were there imposters? And if so, why is judgment still in place? These almost dueling natures of Jesus and God, or the perception of those. How do you reconcile that? It just seems like you can't just say they're all about love, is messaging, branding is off. But what's going on, guys?
Yeah, well, one thing just to get the ball rolling here, because it jumps to mind, is just that Jonathan Rose has a Bible study that his website can be found, spiritandlifebiblestudy.com. Okay, and thanks. And he did one that is just very memorable because it was called something like the Loving Jehovah and the Angry Jesus, because really the alternate arguments can be made very compellingly in terms of Jehovah actually being just this over the top lovey-dovey, deity, and Jesus having a bit of a temper. And so I'm also remembering now that there is somewhere, is it one of the it might be an episode of the Transcendiates, which is on the Swedenborg Foundation YouTube channel, where I think there's an interview with Dr. Rebecca Esterson, where she also digs into how this kind of dichotomy of setting up this Old Testament angry God with this New Testament loving Jesus is, again, sort of a false dichotomy, and kind of this unfounded divide that kind of is like, it's been built up over time as if Christianity and Judaism have something kind of, inherently against each other. And this kind of supports that argument. But actually, if you really look at the text, like, you're going to get blown away by how loving Jehovah is. And then also Jesus is going to give you a little bit of a talking to about what's going wrong in your life. And both of those things can be true, but that doesn't fully answer this person's question, but just some initial thoughts.
Well, we're laying very important groundwork there, that there is a unanimity of narrative more than you might think. So now that we've got that set, the question behind the question, which is, so Jesus got anger too. Why is God so angry? Which is it? Is it love or is it vengeance? Is God strict and stern and disciplinarian, or does God care about us and how we feel? So Cara, which is it?
Well, I don't know, but I have a thought or two. One thing Swedenborg says is that angry image of Jehovah that shows up in the Old Testament sometimes is actually a picture of our own state when we are not aligning with God's love, with love to the neighbor. And so that's how we see God when we're not like ready to follow God and do, just be on his team. So that's an interesting, that's one of those correspondential questions, you know, I mean, that's not how the letter of the story goes, but it's an interesting way to think about what causes God to look like that. Oh, it might be my own state of mind. And I'll let that go. I want to talk about judgment too later on.
Well, okay, cool. It's cool. Really important concept that you brought up first, though, which is the appearance that perhaps, you know, as the clouds make the sun appear to sort of wink in and out of brightness and warmth, the sun's not changing. The sun's not changing at all. Yeah, Karin, did you have something?
Yeah, that it's both points that were brought up. What I was thinking right away of, there are actually a lot of beautiful passages in the Old Testament of God expressing love and mercy and, you know, heartfelt things towards the people. And yeah, what Kara was saying is so important to remember, that the story, like I was saying, the story of the whole Bible is about our spiritual development, which involves us getting more at odds with God sometimes and closer to God sometimes. And so when the text is seeming to depict an angry God, that is a part of the story about when we're at odds with God's love. So when Jehovah seems angry, or Jesus seems angry, it's just depicting when our egos are bumping up against what of God's will. You know, it's a sort of self-centered time or something in us that's not getting it. And so it can seem to us like God is doing all these bad things, but we are just in a state where we're not able to perceive God's love. And the Old Testament, I'd say one difference in the Old Testament and New Testament is kind of the laws. Like there's all these Old Testament laws. Ronnie mentions animal sacrifice and go destroy these enemies, that kinds of things that are more violent in the literal sense than what Jesus was telling people to do, right? But that you also have to think about that when the text was being written, the Revelation has to be written in the language of the times, and the Old Testament was written in Bronze Age times when just humanity was very much in a state of one conqueror conquers the other and enslaves all their people, and definitely lots of the idea of gods that want blood sacrifices and, you know, of humans or animals or whatever. And actually Swedenborg at one point says that the Israelites were guided towards animal sacrifice just so they would not sacrifice their own children. Like I was trying to just, the permission in that was just to try to gradually lead them away from worse things, which is always the case in divine permission. When something is being allowed, it's always for the sake of, so something worse will not happen. But it was also guided that, and when Jesus came along, he was never saying sacrifice animals or, you know, anything to do with violence. It was all getting into now things of the heart, you know, kindness and shunning evil, repentance and things like that, but not go out and slaughter enemies, because it was time for that kind of understanding to be eradicated. And so, but the Old Testament laws, even though they were just had to be permitted in that particular way at that time, kind of like you have to speak to adolescents in a different way than you would speak to an adult or whatever, it was provided that every ritual would correspond to something of the inner journey and the inner purification. It's a correspondence about things that have to happen in our hearts and minds, or the battles, you know, it's corresponding to our battles against our lower ego tendencies and things like that. And so at the same time as God had to be speaking as was best as possible to the population at that time in the literal sense, it also corresponds to things about our inner spiritual journey.
this is a time when you got to read correspondentially. And that, you almost think of the outer sense of the Bible as the hole around a seed. You think every little seed has to have something rough and hard and dense around it, or else the squirrels are just going to eat it. They usually get in anyway. But the thing that's alive is inside of it. And this hole has to have those characteristics, that it has to get the seed, protect it and get it into the ground. And then though the seed that's actually alive, comes out. And so to me, the correspondential meaning, the inner meaning, is the love you're looking for when you're seeing all this confusing, frightening stuff. That there was a place for that. I mean, there was, at a time. Just think about people who that's the language that they spoke. You had to speak that way to try to get any moral authority. But within there's that seed. And the judgment thing, really the correspondence of that. I mean, judgment. If you were to write a story from the perspective of some dust in the kitchen about the broom, it would say, like, the broom is this terrible thing. It knocks you around, it knocks you to the dustpan, throws you out. But if you wrote the same story from the perspective of a person, it's, the broom is awesome. It makes the work so much easier. So it is with the negative stuff in our minds, done like what God does. They think it's pointless and abrasive, but the good stuff, we can really start to recognize, what it's all about. So let's leave it there. That's a great question. We'll get on to our next one soon, but it's time for our donor appreciation raffle. First ever. We're doing 2 months at once, I think, because it's our first ever. If you were a new donor, you can get some really awesome stuff. Or if you have already donated, just cheer these people on, okay? So you're going to see how high tech we are here. This is July. All these wonderful names down here are the people who first donated in July. You can see this is a scientifically controlled, randomized process. My name, if I pick it, it's just fate. That would be weird if this is the first time I donate. Okay, are you ready? Hannah Diario, you have won. Well, I forgot to say what it's for. You won a coffee mug with the sharp new, I think we have an image of it on the screen, the absolutely brilliant new Off the Left Eye logo right on your coffee mug, conversation starter, showcase piece. Will you drink out of it, or will you put it in your trophy case behind glass? That's Thank you so much, Hannah, for supporting us. And now let's see what's going on with August.
Yay.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Thomas Primus, or Primus, you are the proud winner. I gotta say it before, don't I? Of a tote bag, Off the Left Eye logo tote bag. It doesn't matter because people don't have a choice of whether they win or not. So it's like the Off the Left Eye logo tote bag coming to you, and that is going to carry books. It's going to carry supplies, and it's going to carry you into spiritual enlightenment. So that's our new donor raffle. Thank you, everybody. It was just so cool to have so many people contribute for the first time in those 2 months. Really appreciate it. Hey, if you're sitting here today and you haven't donated, try it out. You'll be in the next raffle. We'll do this once a month. Speaking of that, we're halfway through the show and halfway to our goal. If you want to see another 15 minutes and you got a few dollars to spare, otle.cosvox.com. We have to raise money like this because we're not for profit. We don't charge for any of our stuff. The only way we can do all this stuff is y'all donating. Thank you for everyone who has. Obviously, there's a bunch of you. This is from Nana Rosebud, who asks, are we actually meant to all become more spiritually inclined, as in our own mediumship abilities, and communicate easily to the spirit world without a medium? We're talking about spiritual awakenings this week, right? Is part of it that? I mean, do we become more Swedenborg-like in that sense? What do you guys think? Karen, you want to start us off?
Yeah, as we were conveying in these 2 shows about spiritual awakening, the goal is not to seek mediumship abilities, but to open your heart and mind to God, which is the same thing as heavenly love and wisdom. And so it's to become more aware of your lower self tendencies so that you can choose from a higher place, more aware of kindness towards others, more aware of God working in your life, those kinds of things. So that is what we need to work on. And that's the journey of spiritual growth, which involves repentance, which is noticing and turning away from negativity and opening up to God. And if that happens, for some people, it might happen that they actually become more, aware of the spiritual world around them. And for others, it won't. And it doesn't matter one way or another. That doesn't mean you're more or less spiritually awake, because some people just have different abilities in that way. Swedenborg does warn that if you only seek, like, trying to get in touch with the spiritual world or spirits, you can run into trouble, like we talked about in our show. Is it safe to talk to spirits? Because there's a lot of shady characters wanting to get in touch with us. And so the main thing is to work on your connection with God. And then if something, spiritual awareness in terms of awareness of the spiritual world more consciously happens, you will be safe. And I do, though, think that as humanity as a whole becomes more spiritually awake, the veil will continue to get thinner, which I think it has been already since Swedenborg's time, getting thinner. And we will start to go back towards that open communication between the spiritual world and the physical world that was there at the beginning in the golden age that Swedenborg describes. I do think we're headed back to that kind of conscious awareness. But the thing we need to focus on is not worry whether that happens to us personally right now or not, but open your heart to God's love and that kind of thing.
That's great. Yeah. So there's it could, but it's fascinating how to Swedenborg, who was absolutely had a lot of his knowledge filled out or even given through this interaction with the spiritual world, and who was so famous for it, whether or not any of us gains that ability to him is really pretty incidental. I mean, all of his theology comes down to stuff that's universally applicable and accessible. Doesn't mean it couldn't have benefits, and doesn't mean, right, like you're saying, it's not the way things should be, but you're not going to be held back. You don't have to, I got to get an A in this class or else I can't pass. Any other thoughts, Cara or Chelsea? Pretty good. Okay, Karin.
I do want to add one more thing. It's very interesting that often I've read many stories about people who have had near-death experiences then having more psychic abilities afterwards. And it's just interesting that in those cases, because they got really in touch with, open to a God's love sort of thing, they seem to be safely more able to be aware. And of course, that doesn't have to happen that way, but that's just an interesting aside about that I think eventually that will be the case with all of us. For now, the focus is just God's love, but I think over time, those two things will get more and more connected.
It's so interesting that you have this dynamic where Swedenborg had to have that part of his awakening to be able to do the work he did. It was critical to, he says he had his spiritual eyes opened so that he could communicate this information. So it definitely, we all benefited from him having his eyes open. So it definitely could be a thing that brings good stuff into the world. Thanks for the question. That's a great one. Let's move on to our next question. This is from Wriggle Piglet, who asks, Swedenborg's views on physical intimacy before a formal union are clear, but how does one defend that position in the face of the idea that you cannot have one form of intimacy without the other? So what we're talking about here is sex before marriage, if I'm reading between the lines. And what do you do? First of all, what is Swedenborg's message on it? Because sometimes it seems like it's clear, but I'd like to dig into that if necessary. And then what do you do, especially in the way that relationships are usually done now? There's this long, if there's even a marriage at the end, there's this long period before. How can you abstain? All this sort of stuff. Yeah, Cara, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, with just a very short thought to start the ball rolling. I think the point is that we want our long-term relationships to be based on our spirits and our minds rather than our bodies. So, you know, he's saying, like, get to know each other before you make this commitment. You're getting to know each other without that powerful sort of distraction of physical attraction. That's one thought.
Yeah, right. So why? If he's saying, look, it's nothing new for religious stuff to set down rules about sex, and why? Is it just about control? So Swedenborg will lay out, like, okay, there's a particular order that not just it's arbitrarily, but there's a benefit, there's a tangible, long-lasting benefit. It's just good planning. That's the spirit behind it. It's something good for us. But let's continue our exploration, Karin.
Yeah, I think the thing is, everyone's journey to a soulmate partnership is going to be different. And there is one place in Swedenborg's book, Marriage, Love, that does put out this ideal, like, ideally, when you're joining physically in sexual union, you have this love behind it, you know, that you've already really connected in heart and mind. So there's one place that he is saying that, but there is other places in the book Marriage, Love, where he also talks about people who are having sex before marriage, but their goal is they want a marriage, you know, they want a soulmate marriage love. And he says that within that is the conjugal is being preserved. What your goal is what the Lord's going to lead you to. So it's not so crucial what the order is as your goal, because we're all going to have very, winding roads to anything, our own spiritual growth and our own marriage with the Lord and our own marriage with somebody else. And so I think it's, good to have that general goal of having a relationship with somebody that is a joining of hearts and minds. But for, people that's already, they've already engaged in some sexual contact, does that mean they've wrecked everything? Well, no, of course not. It's a journey, and what your long-term goal is carries the day, and the Lord is going to lead you through that. And so just like have that goal, and you learn things along the way. And, and people even can get married, but then they don't end up married to that person forever. And so, it doesn't, that didn't, there they had a sexual relationship with somebody that didn't end up being their forever soulmate partner, whether that was in this world or the next. And so I think the overall message I see in Swedenborg is keep refining your goal of what you're looking for in a relationship with another person. Keep refining it to be how to genuinely love another person and get closer to the Lord in that.
That's awesome. And I do feel like it's worth pointing out that there is these dual experiences with Swedenborg. Like, on one hand, he does talk a ton about the potential for sex being a part of spiritual relationship, and that there is a lot of importance placed on, you can't just do anything, you got to work through steps. There's this careful order around it. So in that way, he does diverge from our sort of, in the West, like the post-Christian, like, just do whatever you want. He seems to indicate that there's actually, you can benefit a lot more from a certain way of doing things. But in the whole of Swedenborg's works, and this included as well, there is this heavy dose of when Jesus does work on the Sabbath, and all the Pharisees are saying, wait, there's this order, you got to follow this order exactly. And he's like, wait, the point of the rules is to get us somewhere. So that what you mentioned before, Karin, about people's premarital sex can be leading to a good relationship. He talks about, doesn't he mention that, like, bark on a tree? He says that's sort of like the outer bark. Look that up. Look that up, confirm it, but I'm pretty darn sure that that's there. So there is this, I just think it's important to note that he will give you an order and this is how you do things, but he has all these, there's always seems to be this living flexibility in it. And there's this quote, angels don't really care what somebody's body is doing. They care what their intent is. That's a bit of a paraphrase, but I really like intent trumps everything. Because you can say, I'm going to follow all these rules. But if you're doing it for these self-serving or control-oriented reasons, I don't know if that really has spiritual cachet or not. Okay, there's my 25 minutes.
I just want to add that when he is talking that way, he does strongly say we must steer away from promiscuity. So, but when he's talking about the kind of premarital sex that there can be, the conjugal being preserved in there is when you are committing to one person and you are trying to work on a relationship. So he definitely does not condone just self-gratification sex with a bunch of different partners.
Right.
The main thing is work on learning to love one person, and whether that person ends up being your forever partner or not, that work you're doing to commit to somebody is making a difference to your eternal marriage.
That's a great point. Yeah, I'm glad that you put that in there. So there we go. Let's just wade into that topic. Hey, we said we'll talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, and we did. So I want to say stop right now and say we did it. We hit our goal. I thought the streak was in jeopardy. We've never missed our goal on one of these shows, but I thought it's going to happen someday. But Sharon, thank you. Sharon showed up and suddenly we were at our goal. And then right after that, Shelley gave, and now we're up above our goal. So thank you so much. And just know all of your donations go twice as far. And you don't have to stop giving now because it really, although we'll do our 15 minutes, it continues to support us. And even you guys who are watching taped, you're watching this after the fact, if you donate, you'll still get the 2-to-1 match on it. So go ahead and go to otle.cosvox.com and keep pumping that up. Thanks so much, everyone. Okay, next question. This is a God dream asks, when Swedenborg discusses the afterlife, is it literal death only, or is this also including an ego death? I believe it was Buddha who said, we must die before we die. Okay, that's a cool one. So what are we gonna say to Buddha about this saying?
I think Paul who says, I die daily, right? And
right.
So yeah, definitely short answer is yes, it's definitely both.
Yeah, let's expand a little bit on what that death before death is like. Yeah, Cara.
To me, it makes me think of the process of repentance and reformation, regeneration, these 3 R's that Swedenborg talks about. When we realize that there's something that we are passionate about that isn't serving us, and we, in one way or another, we need to let that love die. And I've been through a few of them. Some of them are minor, some of them are major, and it really does feel like a death. And to me, that's just sort of another step on the path towards spiritual rebirth, which is different to me than when Swedenborg talks about the afterlife, which means the death of the body, and then we shed our physical being and move into the spiritual realm. But yeah, so to me, the we die before we die, absolutely, and then we die, and it's a different kind of situation.
Yeah,
it's a good day to die before we die.
Yeah.
And I just think along with that, you know, Swedenborg says how we are, you know, our afterlife isn't waiting for us; it's already present with us now, and so that's why the literal death is just when we transition, we, you know, shed this earthly body, and then we're just there where we've always been. And that's why, because we've been ourselves, or we've been developing this whole time. And so it's almost more true to say that it is that, and Swedenborg uses different terms, because on the one hand, we always need this shell of a sense of ourselves that serves us forever, because it's our container of who we are. But right. Swedenborg is very clear and writes about it in some pretty confronting language of how that our outer self or our lower self, or you might call it our ego self, that does need to die. And it's only when that totally gives up and surrenders to the Lord that he says that's when we first start to live. So that we're just sort of living in this kind of not alive yet mode for a lot of our life until we start living. And so yeah, it's really such an interesting thing to think about, and interesting to talk about how love is our life. And so that's first line of Divine Love and Wisdom of Swedenborg's work. And that so that when we have to let go of things that we love because they are harmful, then it really is death, because love is life. So it's like cutting those attachments that are to evil and falsity are deaths, sort of from a spiritual substance perspective.
Yeah, it does seem to get kind of hazy. When are we in the afterlife? When are we in this? Like, not really. I mean, it's very obvious, but again, there's this sort of when you have this ego death or regeneration that you go on, you do get more opened up to the presence of the spiritual world with you. Like Swedenborg was basically dead, right? I mean, he was just like zooming around in the spiritual world. I know we talked before about, does opening of the spiritual eyes have to be part of spiritual awakening? But Swedenborg was as good as dead all the time. Like, what was the difference? Like, he was here and there. He just could go one more place, which was be here. So the more you could become aware of the afterlife, the more you realize we're already in it, but you still got this level to it as well. So yeah, Karin.
Yeah, I think adding to that, what all you guys have been saying is, when you do, I think we go through many ego deaths, like Cara was indicating. Whenever you let an old way of thinking or an old way of feeling die, you emerge as a new version of yourself. And every time that happens, I think we are moving in the spiritual world. So we're not going to be fully aware of that movement until our physical body is shed. But we are actually moving locations in the spiritual world as we let these lower parts of ourself die and become dormant. We are like shedding layers and becoming kind of lighter, less dense, and moving around in the spiritual world. And I'm thinking of Jesus saying, you must, no greater love is than this, to lay down your life for your friends. And he's not talking about physically dying, but to lay down your ego agenda for the sake of others. And so, yeah, I think as the viewer is indicating, there is this ego death that needs to happen more than once. And that's actually moving us along in the spiritual world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to stop for just a teeny little second to say thanks to Mindy, who made a contribution to our program. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Mindy.
That your donation goes twice as far. Thank you for continuing to give. That this is what makes it all happen. And I want to say, about the spiritual awakening and the ego dying, or the death of that part of it. It's again this sort of duality in Swedenborg, because it's like, yeah, that the ego's got to die and become subservient. But as Chelsea says, the sense of self continues to be this essential part of who we are. And even our negative parts, Swedenborg is saying they've got to be purged. To go to heaven, you got to really get your negativity put out, but you never lose anything. Like, it just goes to the periphery, and every once in a while it gets to come back and relive its glory days. We just did a news from heaven about angels have good days and bad days. Angels get let back down into their negative stuff. We do. You continue to, though, you will always have periods where there is some of your negativity active, because that actually helps you improve over and over. So it's always with Swedenborg, like I was trying to say before, this is the way it is, but it's also this way at the same time, which is, I guess, just like life. Hey, let's move on to the next one. This is Marilyn Allen, who asks, is it good to seek out a psychic to find out if your loved ones are okay? Do we have jurisdiction on something like this? I don't know. Yeah, Karin, do you have any thoughts?
I will say, yeah, like you say, we don't have jurisdiction. I could not say if it is good or bad to seek out a psychic, because it so depends on so many factors. And I've heard from both, both kinds of experiences, people who have tried that and it did not help and it didn't go well, and people who have tried that and it was beautiful and they did feel like they got some connection or some real information about their loved ones. So we, like in our show, Is It Safe to Talk to Spirits? Just so much depends upon intention and, what's going on with both the person helping you and yourself. But I would say, I would encourage seeking ways to feel connected to your loved one without, I totally understand. And I actually had the benefit when my daughter died of a relative who was pretty spiritually connected and aware and was able to bring me some reports of what was going on with my daughter. But if you don't have that, I do encourage people to believe in that deeper connection that you are having, and to believe in these little feelings or thoughts or signs or whatever it might be, coincidences that are that can be your loved one just trying to get through to you, to just say, I'm okay and I love you, and those kinds of things. So I guess I would just say, don't feel like that is a requirement to find peace about your loved one. I sure understand, being through grief, how you feel desperate for some obvious connection. And again, we can't say whether you should do that or shouldn't, but just also believe there are these deeper ways to connect.
Great. Yeah, like sort of the both sides on it. It's not strong language. We can't, as professional Swedenborgians, which that's what we are, aren't we? We can't say, oh yeah, based on Swedenborg, this. We have a show that's called Is It Safe to Talk to Spirits, which I think gives a pretty thorough treatment of Swedenborg's, what he has to say about the pitfalls of trying to talk to the spiritual world and the good. Obviously, he was doing it pretty well. So other than that, other than the solid advice Karin gave, Cara or Chelsea, do either of you want to weigh on it? Yeah, Cara.
Taking the question very literally to find out if they are okay, I would just say that they are okay. That everybody on the other side is taken care of in the most careful way. And though we all might have some stuff we have to go through in an effort to really find out who we truly are, who we truly want to be, it might be some bumpy rides for a while, but we're all going to be okay, because that's the agenda, is to get us to where we are who we are, and we end up where we belong.
That's a great point. So check that one off the list already.
Yeah, I guess just one thought I have is that that's what I think Swedenborg offers, which is so great, is understanding the framework of the spiritual world. And and Swedenborg knew, as anybody can, how, of course, if somebody is saying, hey, I'm a psychic, I can tell you how your loved ones are doing in the afterlife, we're going to be curious and we're going to want to go and ask those people what's up. And even Swedenborg himself told other people about, hey, your spouse is this, or your family is that, or your brother is this, and gave people reports from the afterlife. Kind of used it as a mediumship. It's not like he hung a sign out his door and started getting paid for it or something. He was just offering it as information. But so it's like, again, it's not necessarily, is it good or bad? It's that there is this spiritual world that you can understand, and Swedenborg wrote all these books about it to help us understand, this is what heaven is like, this is what life after death is like, the process, dying and waking up in the spiritual world, and kind of so we can have access, so that everybody can basically have access to that knowledge. And when that's just there, then the question of, should I go to a psychic or not, is like, well, is it a good psychic? I don't know. Like, is it like any business? Like, well, should I go get a massage? Well, yeah, if the person's recommended or whatever, like, you just know what to watch out for and what not to, and what to avoid and everything. So,
right. maybe some of the spirit of the question is in, there are, I think, some religious traditions that will put a blanket statement out, like all those things are bad. But you make a great point about it's about the function, it's about the heart and mind of the person who's there. We certainly couldn't say that somebody who's saying they can see the spirit world can't. They may well do it. I couldn't imagine starting a business like that unless I really could. So it's probably out there. And I want to say that I was reading a really great introduction to the shorter works of 1763 by Dr. Jonathan Rose, where he lines out how Swedenborg sort of used his mediumship as a promotional tool. That in Sweden, he was having a lot of trouble getting anybody to pay attention to any of his books. He was not getting response from the British when he went and published in London. So when he went back to Sweden, he started telling everyone about how their loved ones are doing, and it created this whole buzz around the community, and that was to try to get people to look at his books. So he wasn't above doing that.
Oh, I'll just say, I listened to that introduction because it's available as an audiobook on the Swedenborg Foundation YouTube channel.
That's out now?
Everybody can go listen. Yes.
What? Okay.
And
what are we doing, you guys?
And then you can hear some fun extra interviews with Jonathan Rose about that subject matter in the Inside Off the Left Eye podcast. Okay, the promotions are over.
Coming up on Sunday. Okay, hey, let's take another question maybe before our bonus round begins. Empatheo asks, I was thinking, if the Bible is written in parables because it wasn't the right time to know everything, what if some of Swedenborg's texts are the same, written in parables, and we can't understand it yet? Well, for sure we can't understand it, because really, what even is goodness and truth? And you talk about goodness and truth all the time. I couldn't draw it for you. I have like sort of an idea, but what do you think? Are there any correspondences?
Every week on News from Heaven, which is pretty great.
What's that?
You do try to draw it every week on News from Heaven, which is pretty great.
So there's evidence out there that I don't know what goodness and truth are. You can watch me flounder on our Wednesday show.
Yeah.
Corinne.
I'll just share some thoughts. I do want to acknowledge that there are some Swedenborgians that do look at Swedenborg's writings that way, that look for deeper meaning in what is written. To me, it's a different kind of revelation than the Bible. I don't see it as written in parables so much as that this revelation was supposed to be offered in a rational way that our rational minds could chew over and think over. So that's just a different thing than parables. Swedenborg sure uses tons of examples that you have to remember are dated example. He's like using examples from the 1700s and things to try to help us grasp these things. But I don't see that as parables. I see that as, just as examples to help our rational minds have something to use to understand. So I don't see it as parables. That's just my opinion. I feel like it's when Jesus said, there will come a time I'll tell you plainly about the Father. Like Swedenborg was called to this mission of starting that. I mean, he was starting to tell us more plainly about the things that Jesus couldn't talk to people about yet. And the Lord, Jesus Christ, giving that to Swedenborg to explain as best as Swedenborg could through his particular mind. I do know that there were things that Swedenborg was not permitted to write. He's a couple of times.
Yeah.
There's some things I'm not allowed to tell you. Once in Divine Providence, I just recently came across it. Like, there's some things about Providence I'm just not allowed to write yet.
We can handle it. Just tell us.
I know. And then apparently near his death, I remember reading that he said to somebody, "Oh, if only you could know the things I wasn't permitted." Because someone was saying, "I'm so grateful for all you wrote." And Swedenborg said, "Oh, if only you knew the things I wasn't allowed to write." So that's, what he's given us is plenty. Like, it's going to take me my whole lifetime here on earth to try to absorb that. So we've been given plenty to work with, but it's also exciting to know that there's just endless more stuff to learn that we'll learn in the afterlife. But also, I think Swedenborg's writings are not supposed to give us every single answer. They're supposed to give us this wonderful, big, broad framework that then we can take, and through our, as we spiritually grow, we'll get insights coming in from the Lord that can add to that. So there's some thoughts.
Great. No, I love it. Any further thoughts from the group, Chelsea?
Oh, I was going to say, go ahead, Cara. And then, yeah, I do have a thought.
Oh, because I have this little, for you folks at home, I have this little view up there of all of them. And just like, so we don't start that awkward Zoom thing of like, oh, you go. No, oh, we both start here. I try to see like who's kind of, okay, me, and call them. But I misread some cues. Okay, Cara, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Just, we were talking earlier about the difference between, in the Bible, between, for instance, the epistles and the stories. And I think of it as sort of the same thing, that the writers of the epistles were trying to start the Christian church. And Swedenborg here is, again, appealing to our sort of rational mind to start this new church. So, so I don't tend to think of it in the parable-y kind of way. But like Karin says, some people do read Swedenborg's works just the same way. They're looking for an inner meaning and inner sense all throughout it.
Yeah. For me, it definitely seems like a very different experience reading the Bible versus reading Swedenborg. With the Bible, you can tell it is art. It is saying something. There is hidden meaning in it. It's like song lyrics from the 90s alternative rock. Like it's a poem. You got to pull something out of it. Whereas Swedenborg is very much trying to get you to understand a particular thing. Like there's no obfuscating or trying to shroud it in layers of like cool looking fog. It's just, do you understand this? I'm going to just hammer you until you understand exactly what I'm talking about. It seems very much like, I would be shocked if it was in correspondences, but it's just me.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, the thing I was thinking of saying, it's kind of like a middle in between thing between what you all are saying, and it was making me think of Swedenborg's experience of seeing the Nunkliket temple, that what he describes as the Nunkliket temple, and it's called that because he sees this temple in the spiritual world in heaven, I guess, and there's this inscription in Latin over the door that says longer than just Nunkliket, but it says, now it is permitted to enter with understanding into the mysteries of faith. And in this number where he's describing it, and I pulled it up, so I want to read it, because so it's from True Christianity 508, and I just love this idea where he says, in the new church, we are allowed to use our intellect to explore and penetrate all the church's mysteries, and also to use the word to support what we find. The reason this is allowed is that the teachings of the new church are continuous truths revealed by the Lord through the word. Rational arguments that support these truths cause the intellect to open up more and more at its highest level and to be elevated into the light that the angels in heaven enjoy. And so, and he goes on, but that idea that there is this, like, even if Swedenborg's just like, here's the teaching, he calls what he wrote the teachings for the new church, but he's saying there are these continuous truths that has this like infinite depth where we open up to heaven. And so it's kind of the both and, where it's trying to make it as plain, to talk plainly of the Father. But then of course, like Curtis was saying, there's just this ever deepening sense of like, wow, how did I not know this? Or like, I never thought of this way before. We're just always going to be expanding our sense of what these truths that we read in this book mean, because we're opening up more and more to the light of heaven. So
that's a great point. It so is the journey with it, that things in those very books, Swedenborg's books, I understood in a fairly flat wooden way so many years ago, continue to show new life and show new. This is why when I go to read Swedenborg, I just open some book that I know I've already read and read it, and wow, this is something. So there's definitely a lot to be said for the continuous container, that you can get something and get new insights out of something, because there's infinite insights circling around any one sentence. And then we start to get into like the communication of ideas by writing and what, but yeah. Oh, this is great. This is great. Hey, I want to say something. Gloria made a donation. Thank you so much. We appreciate you supporting what we're doing. And that goes twice as far because of the matching gift. She went to otle.cosvox.com. You can, whether you're watching live or watching in post. Okay, we are into our bonus round here. This is because of all your donations that we're even talking anymore. So thank you so much. We got 10 more minutes. Let's make them count. This is from Mindy Tarquini, writer in residence, who asks, how do you know a sign is a sign? Is it a pile-on of synchronicities, just that constant nudge? I always worry that something is wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Do we get little hints? Are angels or somebody trying to talk to us through correspondences or something? And how would you ever know? Yeah, Chelsea.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that I want to be empathetic to her say of, I always worry something is wishful thinking. And I think that that's a universal experience, and that is a certain level of your mind that's always going to be thinking that way. And so that the lower mind is always going to take any sign and say, is this wishful thinking? Have that kind of fear and concern. And so I've totally experienced that. And even as I, for myself, get more sort of sensitive to say, oh, well, maybe it is. And still, making space, knowing that part of my mind is always piping up and saying like, well, is it or not? And so just wanted to put that out there, that I just totally get it. And just that you think, is this wishful thinking, doesn't mean that it is, or like that. Anyway, yeah.
Right, and it's a great point, because we tend to think, oh, if it's something cool, it's probably not real because I want it to be real, or something. But that very longing can be, heaven inspires longing. So yeah, Karin.
Yeah, I was assuming when I read the question that Mindy is talking about like a sign from a loved one, like I love you and I'm here and that kind of thing. And for that kind of sign, I agree with Chelsea that there's always going to be this niggling lower part of our mind trying to second guess that. But I think when you just feel something, something happens and you feel, this something about that reminds you of your loved one, or you feel this little surge of love or this memory or something, I would just say, just let yourself believe that's real. Because at that moment, when it just stirred something up in you about your loved one, you knew right at that moment that was real. And it's just kind of after the fact, your lower mind is going to try to talk you out of it or something. But the thing is, love is the most real thing, and so I feel like rather than our lower mind that is going to try to always be skeptical, like, oh, whatever I most wish for with my heart is not going to be the real thing. No. I think it's the opposite. Like, whatever would be the most loving thing, that is true. So if, like, right when you needed a sign and you feel like, oh, that was my loved one, yeah, absolutely. Just let yourself believe that. I believe that's true, that those are real. It occurred to me another thing there can be sort of signs like, oh, this sign is saying I'm supposed to do that or supposed to do that. And with that, you might need more discernment about where is this leading me, and that, that kind of thing. But for the signs of just like a sign that your loved one, I'm here, I love you, it's okay, I would say always believe in those. That's just love, and love is the most real thing.
That's cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's great. Cara, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just to me, like Karin says, in the moment of that kind of sign, if that brings your loved one to your mind and your heart, there he is, and go for it. To me, it's a super wonderful gift that some people get, and some people are shy about accepting gifts, period. This kind of gift, I too would love to encourage people to learn how to accept and believe in.
Great. Hey, let's end on a potentially controversial note, shall we? We have one more question, and this is from Shane Aegis, who asks, where does the Book of Mormon fit into the Swedenborgian point of view? Do you believe it is a true alternate testament of Jesus Christ in the Americas? Okay, so let's start admitting whether we've read it or not. I have not.
Stop.
I have
Okay.
not.
Okay.
I want to
Yeah.
just point out that the Book of Mormon was written after Swedenborg's writings, so of course he's not going to be saying anything about it.
Right.
There have been lots of texts in lots of world cultures and things that are said to be from spiritual origins, and I really think that's for people themselves to decide in the validity of that. I do have a interesting article I share with people sometimes where somebody looks at the similarities and differences between what Swedenborg wrote and what's written in the Book of Mormon. Yeah, I haven't read the Book of Mormon, so it's not something we can from Swedenborg make some judgment on. But if anyone wants to just give us a comment and we can share that article where somebody compares the concepts, just look at what is being written about the concepts. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, and this is kind of one of those examples where, right, like what Karin said, it doesn't exactly fit. I mean, Swedenborg himself, since it didn't exist when he was writing, it doesn't really fit. But then beyond that, it's a religious tradition that is. So even though it came about after Swedenborg was writing, he writes that any religious tradition can, and whatever religious texts are at the basis of that can are truths that can lead people to heaven, to accepting the Lord, and being in a spiritual community. And I guess, like this person says, is it a true alternate testament of Jesus Christ in the Americas? Like I said, I'm not as familiar with it, but same with, there's the Jesus came to show us what the divine human is, and that is the embodiment of the divine human. And so again, if any text is connecting us to what the one God is and developing a relationship with that, whatever the substance of it is here, we're going to get to continue to grow in our understanding of that in the afterlife. And about religious ideas in general, I feel like it's great to go to people who are of that tradition. And there are a lot of Swedenborgian Mormons, or one time I heard somebody say they wanted to call themselves Swedenborgians. So there are a lot of people who are Mormon who have grappled with, who have found delight and inspiration in Swedenborg's works, and who have sort of married that to their Mormon faith. And so I feel like I would ask them what they think about it. And there are, I think, well, there's the Watching and Reading Swedenborg Facebook group. And there are a lot of Mormons who are in that group who you could reach out to if this person is specifically wants to have that kind of a conversation. I think there's also, and if this person is Mormon, there's also, I think I heard mentioned that a group of people were going to start their own Mormon Swedenborgian Facebook group specifically for other Mormons who want to connect about Swedenborg. So that might be out there, although I don't have a name in my mind for that. So yeah,
I would say it's cool to have those direct resources. And just thinking about that phrase, fit into the Swedenborgian point of view. One of the things I like about the Swedenborgian point of view is that it is one of, I don't know how many there really are, that from the ground up, from their founding, had the space to fit other things into it. That Swedenborg, for example, will say correspondences, and obviously the Torah and the Gospels and the New Testament, he fits those in, but that he'll actually say, the Greek myths, the Egyptian hieroglyphics, these are correspondences as well. These other religions, this is where they come. That his is a framework that acknowledges the existence of all of those, right? So that's one thing. But then also, I generally, because I love Swedenborg stuff so much, I generally think just about everything else, that's probably, who knows if it's anything, but Swedenborg is really something. But you never know what the Lord is doing, because even while Swedenborg was getting all of his insights and writing his writings, he says in there somewhere, I can't remember where, he says, right now there are people in Africa getting either a similar or equivalent revelation to what I'm getting. So the Lord's working in a lot of ways, man. And so I certainly have encountered some very enthusiastic Mormons who found our channel and love it and feel like it's compatible and that sort of thing. So that's what I want to say.
Yeah, and I think I love the place where Swedenborg talks about, so he's talking about this new church that we mentioned and the teachings of the new church being these continuous truths, and he describes the new church as having just this great variety. And the new church varieties is sort of like a phrase, and I think that like the 7 churches that are talked about in the book of Revelation, or just there's other places in the Bible that he says are talking about the new church and all of its varieties. And so that is just really cool to see, like, going on what you were saying, Curtis, that people are it's fun to see it growing and to see people connecting to these truths no matter what their religious background.
That's great. Hey guys, we're over time. We're over our time. Karin, you can say something, but it's got to be really, really short.
Swedenborg talks about the Lord works through texts. He talks about Islam being written because it would particularly speak to a certain kind of people in the Arab world, so that the Lord works through all sorts of different texts to reach people, because the whole point is not exact ideas, but is it leading you to love of the neighbor, love of God.
There you have it. Karin gets the last word, and this flew by. This was super fun. Hey, I want to say thanks again to everyone who gave. We had a total of 5 donors giving $130. So with our match, that's $260 coming in to Off the Left Eye. Thank you, everyone. And you watching at home in post, go ahead and drive that number higher. Hey, what do we do with that money? Why are we asking for it? Well, we make programming. And guess what? There's programming coming up this Sunday. We have a podcast coming out. The episode of Inside Off the Left Eye is Signs of Awakening and a Strange Case of Spiritual Blindness. So be sure to tune into that on Sunday. Then when Monday rolls around, our next episode of Swedenborgian Life kicks off a new week and a new subject with this show, Spirits Cause Anxiety. How are you going to miss that one? Thanks, Chelsea and Cara and Karin. It was super fun having all of you on today.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was really great to be here. I love getting to spend this time with everybody.
Hear, hear. I agree. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, wishing y'all a wonderful week. Thanks for being here.
All right, everybody. We'll see you again super soon, so don't even worry about it. Talk to you later.